So I think record keeping is really important because, to use a cliche, you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you aren't keeping good records, you don't know where you're spending money, you don't know where you're losing money. At the end of the year, when you go to your accountant to file taxes, you can't tell them how much did you really make, how much did you really lose on the farm. I think a good example, so I believe this was back in like 2023, one of the farmers markets we did, the beginning of the season just seemed a little off for some reason. And it seemed like sales were lower, seemed like customer turnout each week was lower. I had that feeling, several other vendors at the market had that feeling, and eventually that feeling came around to the market manager, and she started questioning some of the vendors. And so it was about 2 months into the market, and I sat down one afternoon and pulled up Square and went into that particular market in Square, and I looked. And to that point in the season, after whatever it was, eight markets into the season, we were actually had higher sales than the previous year. But by looking at the data, what I saw was that whereas in previous years, sales had been fairly regular week to week, that season, things were really fluctuating. So 1 week would be really bad, then we'd have a really great week the following week, then maybe we'd have 2 lower weeks, and then a really good week. Having that information, having that data, what I perceived and what other vendors perceived wasn't reality, because I guess we naturally just recall the down weeks and don't think that all those other weeks were really high. But having that data and looking at it, oh, okay, yeah. So the pattern of the market from week to week has been very different from previous seasons. But actually, when you add up all those weeks to that point, we were actually doing better. We were further ahead than we were in previous seasons. I think it's just incredibly important to have the records, have the information, and be able to look at it and know factually what happened. That goes for whatever, whether you're a vegetable producer or anything. There's things in business called, in sales called loss leaders, and that's a product that you sell, at cost or even losing some money, but it's something that helps draw customers in. So for us, that was always eggs. Being a meat vendor, I couldn't go to a farmer's market and set my product out on the table. I have a very perishable product. It has to stay frozen. I can't set it on the table and have customers walk through the market and see what's for sale on my table. But eggs were something that I could put out on the table and attract people into my booth. And then I could talk to them. They could see my sign for what all I had available. Yes, we made money on eggs, but it wasn't the bulk of our sales. It was very minor compared to the chicken and turkey products we sold. I think if we didn't have the eggs and we weren't able to actually put something on our table at the market to attract people, we would have had far less sales of our main products. So keeping the records, having the data, knowing what it cost me to produce a dozen eggs, and knowing, okay, maybe I only make 50 cents on a dozen eggs, but I know that 50 cents is leading to additional sales of products that I am making more money on. I have to have that information. I have to have the data to make those decisions and understand my business. And without it, I can't make educated decisions, and my business is doomed to failure if I just try to run it on instinct alone.
If you want to not feel like you need to go get a job that is air conditioning and paying you $20 an hour, then yes, track your time so that then you know that you're not making $2 an hour for what you do and what you love. And so, yeah, that's how that farmer told me that. He's like, Duane, grow cabbage. There's this boy up in Burnsville that's making thousands of dollars growing cabbage, but he looks at how much his fertility is. He knows right when to side dress his cabbage. Again, he's planting it once, harvesting it once, sowing it once. And that's a product that is on the American plate 2 or 3 days a week, is cabbage and potatoes and sweet corn. But
but as we get more serious of,
Yeah.
well, we want this to be our full time.
Yeah.
As soon as you start tracking all the numbers year to year, you can compare more year to year.
Yeah.
And that's when the dream becomes a reality of, we can do this, or we need to adjust.
Yeah. What are the dials that we can tweak to maybe shave off an hour of harvesting? Is there a better way to toss it? Is there a more efficient way to wash it? Maybe it is wholesaling. Wholesaling could be the number that we all of a sudden dropped off, X amount of boxes at a kitchen or a sauerkraut company, and we didn't have to then sell it 5 times at a farmer's market over the course of 5 weeks. So, and did that reduction in cost, and you could generally look at the numbers based off of time to see if that is better to drop it off as a wholesale or to keep it as a retail product.
I think running a successful farm as a business, you pour a lot of your heart into your business, especially if you're with a partner doing it. You're pouring your whole world into it. And so taking note of those interactions with the people eating your food will keep you going during those hard times. Paying attention to numbers, how much you're pouring into financially, how much time you're choosing to not do something and put that towards the farm instead.
Yeah, it's a work-life balance. So there's a guy named Chris Blanchard with Purple Pitchfork. He was a director of Noah or Moses. Anyways, he's passed away, unfortunately, but he brought up a point on his podcast, and he used to teach a lot of young farmers in the Midwest. He's gotten a divorce. He's gone through all the ringers of farm life. And I bring that up now to say that he brought up that you have for a new farmer, you have the 1 year, 5 year, and 10-year mark of where you would have failure. Most people fail at the first year with farming. They're like, they put money out and then they're like, whoa, I didn't see any of it back. They're broke. Their family and their marriage and their life is all up in an upheaval because you're just following after this crop. And then the 10-year mark is when you've gotten over these other humps, you've found a market, you're making money, but now all of a sudden you're just in this rabbit hamster wheel of what are we doing?
Part of the success of the farm is also changing with the times. If you told a farmer 50 years ago, you're going to have to start doing online sales, what would that sentence even mean to them? And we're looking at that now. There's enough people asking us to buy our milled goods online that do we set up a subscription? How are we going to do that? So that could be another market that we pivot into. And then to touch base on the kids aspect, we do have to think about that. And we are at that phase of, well, what would that look like in our farm system if we choose that? And how can we make enough money to do that? How can we make enough time? And deciding, putting a lot of planning and forethought into it and intention for making those questions, answering those questions now so that in 2-3 years it falls into place. But you really have to think ahead on a lot of these things that we may have a big idea right now that we've been talking about for a couple years, and it's not going to come into fruition until next year probably. But we're going through how much it'll cost for the packaging and the design and the marketing and the actual growing aspect. And does this all work? And then maybe it'll be a thing that we have these goals that Duane was saying, 1 year, 5 year, 10-year markers that you reach towards those goals, because in the summertime especially, it's just everything goes out the window and you have to keep reminding yourself, what's our goal here?
The biggest thing on running a farm business is record keeping, which most farmers do not like to do. But if you're going to try to make a profit, you have to know what it costs, how long it takes you to do this. And if you don't have those records, you can't make a good practical decision of what you're going to actually grow on the farm. And many times you try something out just to see how it does. And that's okay, but you wouldn't go in and put acres of it, not knowing if you had a market, if you could sell it. I tell other farmers, if you don't know where you're going to sell it, you shouldn't put it in the ground. Well, I worked for the government for 34 years, so record keeping is pretty natural to me. But, and I've always done businesses, ran businesses, so even though it was the government. And so again, how do you make changes, whether it's hiring personnel or growing crops? You have to have those records to say, this is what you need to do. And of course, your accountant likes that also when you get ready to do your taxes. I have Excel spreadsheets. I keep everything in the field in just logbooks and then go transfer it into it. So I'm still old school that way. I know young people have that on their phone and they're making all those records on their phone, but that helps me do it easier. It doesn't matter how you do it. That's what I tell people. It doesn't matter how you keep your records, just so that you keep records. The purpose of farm records is decision making for your next year. So you probably do it the most if you're growing crops that are vegetables or flowers. You're going to do that in the wintertime. So I'm probably, as we're winding down, everybody prays for the first frost. So everything dies if you're not in a high tunnel or something like that. But probably right after, the first frost, we start sitting down because the seed catalogs start coming within the next month or so, and we start making decisions. If you're in animals, it's going to be right after you've sold the animals that you've raised for the year, and you look at your production to get that animal to sell or to slaughter if you're going to have meat or something like that, to make decisions on, do I want to grow that again? Is that something that worked well on my farm? Did people want to buy it? I remember we grew these long purple beans, foot long. I don't even remember the name of them because, my manager thought, oh, people will love this. And they were going like, what are these things? I just want the beans that you snap. And they were supposed to be stir fried, and they'd go, what? Of course, this was 10 years ago. To make those decisions during the winter, because you're going to be ordering if you're seeds or if you're going to breed animals, that may be done at a different time of year, but you've looked back at your records to say, oh, this ram did really well, this ewe is really good, throwing twins, we want to keep that one, or do we want to make a change on that? So, but then sometimes it's throughout the year. If you're doing vegetables and you have your spring cold crops, you won't have those again till maybe the fall if you decide to grow them again. And some things you just hate to grow sometimes after you've done it. Like, I do not like to grow green beans because they are just so intensive to have to harvest, and things like that. You would also, during that period, be talking to where you're going to sell. In the case of restaurants, we would go down and sit with the chef in the wintertime and say, this is what we sold you, which they're always shocked when they see the list of what we sold them. And then what do you want to have next year in the restaurant? And is it something I can produce? Squash blossoms were like great one year because they did fried squash blossoms, and they were so easy to do, and you still got squash. So that was fun. So it depends on your industry, what time of year. Most of the time farmers are replanting in the winter because that's the slow time of the year. But these records, if you just sit down and go, oh, let me sit down and think about this. How much did I sell that for? Or what did it cost? You won't remember it, especially if you're my age. But most of the time it's done that way, so And a lot of farmers, if they're cattle, they have a notebook on the front of their truck, and they keep up with when that calf was born, when they tagged it, what was its growth over the period of time. We weighed every crop that came off the farm because that's how we kept up with numbers and weights, because people pay by weight when we sold it at the farmer's market. And we wanted to know what our waste was. So when we come back with something, it was either a number or we weighed out what we had, like lettuce, so we'd know what was the waste. Luckily, after a while, that lets you know how much did you harvest for this market so that you don't actually end up wasting more, If it was a weight type product, lettuce would be the biggest thing for us, but numbers of things. How many squash did you bring back? How many squash did you take? Now, not everybody does this. I'm a production person, so I like to know, what did they buy? How many did they buy of it? And then that let me see if I had things priced right. Sometimes you underprice and sometimes you overprice. And so you have to decide, was it the quality? Was it the price? That you had on that. But if you can't get back to that piece of how do you know how much to grow next year if you don't know what you actually used? The way we did it, it was a notebook. We knew how much we had when we took it because we had harvest it the day before, put it in the cooler, and that so we knew how much we were taking. And then we just marked down hash marks, this many things or this much weight, whatever. It was mostly things because the lettuce you bagged. And then what you had left over. Again, so that you knew if you harvested enough for the next market, so you didn't have waste. She was very good at figuring this out. We very seldom had waste at the end of the day. I don't know how she knew that. I think because she had sold at a farmer's market for many years. We just listed all the products that we took. So that was kind of a sheet we already had done inside. And then she just did hash marks. So we knew how many we took and then how many we came back with. Anything you sell by weight, either tomatoes, potatoes, or something like that. We knew the weight before we went to the market because we weighed it before we went. And then we'd weigh at the end because writing down 2 pounds, 1 pound, something, that would take a lot of time. Everything else like cucumbers and squash or bushel baskets of cherry tomatoes, we knew how many of those we took. We would then weigh again if it was a weight product like potatoes or tomatoes, so we knew what we came back with. But again, and that's how you refine so you don't waste. Of course, most farmers, when they bring it back, they eat it. But we were trying to make that really slim of the loss that we had between, which then led to, at the end of the year, how much should I produce for this market if it ran similarly?
Roy's good at talking to the new farmers and saying, all right, sit down. How much money do you want to make? How are you going to make it? They don't think, how am I going to make a profit on this? So, and we don't do the stem count. Some people figure out how many flowers they have, how many flowers per stem. We don't do that. We kind of do it, but we don't do it officially. It's like you've got to think, how am I going to make money on this dahlia? So this dahlia is expensive. It takes up space. The tuber is expensive. The labor is expensive. If I dig them, it's really expensive to pay labor. So how many of these do I have to sell to make growing dahlias worthwhile? And a lot of people, good flower farmers, have given up dahlias because they're not a profitable crop. If they have to dig them all and all winter, I mean, that's just, you cut it all back, you dig them, you store them, you pull them out, you divide them. It's a lot of work and a lot of time. For us, it's profitable because we leave them in the ground. Here in the South, we can. So we leave them in the ground, we'll dig a few to divide. But getting new farmers to think about, is this profitable for me? Should I buy plugs? Should I grow from seed? What's going to produce the most? Because you can grow pretty flowers and have all these Instagram followers, but are you making money at the end of the year? If you're going to be a flower farmer and you're going to invest in it, you've got to figure how to make money.